It's good to see you. No problem. Good to see you. Hey, we are really looking forward to today. We have a fantastic speaker who some of you have met before, and I'll talk some more about her soon. But in the meantime, we talk about Chad Littlefield here sometimes. I know Stacy is a new, not devotee, but she's been reading his stuff, trying out his stuff. I'm sure others have as well. And so this is my newest activity from him. So let's give it to you a little bit bigger. Now I can do it. Where's the slideshow thing? There it is. All right. So you can think about this for a minute. You can do this in your own time, in terms of, or your own way, how you want to list things. But looking back on your career, list 25 cool, noteworthy, or significant things you've accomplished. And you can list those in your head. You can list them on your computer. If you like to write things on paper, if you want to put it on your phone, because that's where all information goes. But let's just take a couple of minutes as folks are coming in to take some thought, some time for 25 things you've accomplished in your career. We're going to wait to share that with others. We're going to do the chat waterfall where when I say go, they'll all come into the chat. So once you've listed out your 25, if you want to type one in the chat but not send it out yet, you can do that. So we'll go ahead and take, let's say about 3 minutes of quiet. I'll go ahead and put the directions into the chat as well, so that as you're thinking about it, you have them there. So 25 accomplishments from your career. Yeah. And let me know too if you have questions about this. I've got 2 more minutes for your list. I'm choosing the one that you want. Right. And if you want to start typing it into the chat, but not sending it.
Jennifer, is it just one item you want us to put in the chat?
Yeah, out of your list of 25, the one that you'd want to share. May or may not be the very, very, very best one, but just the one that you think you want to share with this group. Okay. Is everyone pretty much ready to push send? I didn't mind too. Okay, ready, set, go. All right, and now we're going to take a couple of minutes to look across others, what they're sharing, helps us learn about each other. And also you may see something there where you think, it'd be really great to connect with this person, perhaps at the OSEP Project Directors Conference, perhaps at the SPDIG National Meeting, or maybe just, via email and other kinds of meetings. But go ahead and take a minute to look over the accomplishments here. Okay, great. So one thing I'm seeing is that, or at least for me, seeing an individual, you working and impacting an individual, to me packs as much of a punch in terms of accomplishment as international or national or big systems. I also see there's some personal relationship, there's some work. And we know that we are all of those things put together, right? And it's all important. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking time to think through your accomplishments, to share them with others. Hopefully it gave you a little shot in the arm to think about what you have accomplished, and also gave you some inspiration seeing others. So again, if you get a chance at the Project Directors Conference, you see someone sharing something that you're interested in, please do reach out to them. You could either do that via a private chat right now, or you can let me know if you don't have their email address. And so the principle from Made to Stick that we are focused on today is credibility. And when you listed out your accomplishments in your mind, I'm just wondering how that helps you think about your credibility and how you share that credibility with others. And then the same, what did you think when you looked at others' accomplishments? All right, as always, we give you a little warning about breakouts so that you have the ability to use your camera and to use your microphone if possible, so that we can get to know each other better during each meeting. I'm going to talk about some upcoming news and events, the OSEP Project Directors and Leadership Conference, the SPDIG National Meeting, the Directors Webinar. I'm pretty excited about that. And then talk about our guest speaker today on coaching and communication. So the Project Directors Conference, hopefully this is not news to anyone since we've been talking about it for a while, but just a reminder, July 24th to 26th here in DC, Crystal City. And if you have not gotten lodging yet, they have opened more hotels. So we now are across 4 different hotels because Many people are coming, which is great. This is probably the largest turnout maybe we've ever had. We do have a survey for you so that we can be prepared at the project directors conference. And also there's a question in there about the SPDIG national meeting and attending that. And I believe Kelsey just put that in the chat. So you can grab it and do it later. If you can pay attention to two things at once while I'm talking, you're welcome to do it right now as well. It's not a very long survey, but one of the questions in there is about having lunch with us, because there's a program area meeting. I'll share that in a second. That's going to be on the second day. And the program area meeting is where we, the SPDIG, get to be together face to face at the conference. And unfortunately, the only time they could give us for the 2 hours together was through a lunch period. And we don't want anyone to starve, although I'm probably the most likely to starve of anyone. I need my lunch every day. I've never understood people who say they forgot to eat lunch. But if you take that survey, you can let us know the item that you're interested in. We are going to go healthy. Hopefully that's not problematic to anyone, but there's a good salad place here. And so we're going to use them. I'd like to know your order. The SPDIG national meeting has changed by 1 day to October 17th and 18th because we were able to find a better space for the meeting. When we originally surveyed people, folks were as open to meeting those days as to 18th and 19th. So we are hopeful that that works for everyone. We have the May SIG Network newsletter came out. If you did not get a chance to read it, I have the link here, and these slides will be on our today's calendar page. All right, just a reminder, I've reached out to folks. If you did not receive an email, if you're the project director and you did not receive an email from the CFI group on behalf of the U.S. Department of Education, let me know and I'll have the contractor resend it. We had a great response rate last year. I think it was number 2 in the whole department. And so, of course, we want to have another good response rate, but we really do use the information to think about how we can better serve you. We got great ratings last year. I shared that with everyone, and we don't necessarily expect that again, but we do want the good response rate. Thank you. Coaching and communication. So today we will be thinking about how to coach teams with Dr. Melanie Upright, who again, I'm going to give a chance to introduce herself, get into things in just a second. But I also want to let you know that we have some special guests coming in July, and they are from Denver University. And these scholars at Denver University are mainly doctoral students, some master's students in the school psychology program, and this is their program evaluation class. And so what they did is they looked at our evidence-based professional development worksheets and specifically at coaching within those worksheets. And they've used that information to make some connections with what works with the coaching strategies, the coaching models. They've connected that with the research and have some recommendations for us. So they're going to join us in July. And we're also going to be hearing from the Native American Working Group. I didn't add this here because it's not coaching communication, but just to give you an update that one of our work groups is going to be sharing at that time as well. All right, now I will finally be able to introduce our presenter. Many, or at least some, I actually don't know the numbers, but some of you went to one of the breakouts at the SPDIG national meeting and got to learn from Melanie Upright at that time. Loved it. We saw lots of good evaluation responses. So I reached back out to her and told her we're working on coaching communications, and do you have anything you can share? And she was kind enough to say yes and think through what might be most useful for this group. So Dr. Upright is from Johns Hopkins, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, an introduction. But we're just so happy to have you here today, Melanie, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. First, the very first thing, we're going to use the 4 H's, which is history, hero, heartbreak, and hope. And I want to just say this one might tap 2 areas, history and heartbreak. I'm not yet Dr. Upright, although that is something I'm working towards. So in the future, we will be able to officially say that. But my history with SPDIG actually is something I wanted to share, just to let you know that I had led in my district in 2012 a SPDIG grant that was very successful, and we were able to obtain really great data that ultimately led to designation of an ESSER level 2 evidence-based practice. So, we worked really well through this SPDIG work and had just phenomenal success. So I'm just excited to be able to now be a part of this group with you and sharing some additional ideas for you as you're navigating this work. In terms of a hero, there are so many people out in the world that have done beautiful things. And I'm going to choose a hero that's kind of close to home. And it might be a surprise. Some of you might know her, Dr. Marilyn Muirhead. She led the SPDIG grant through the Maryland State Department of Education at the time. And I will tell you, her way of helping us to understand what continuous improvement was, how to apply implementation science, it really transformed my work and my ability to help others. And so she has this unique way. One of the things that she always would say is, I'm making it up. Because really so much of trying to solve big challenges means taking risks and not necessarily knowing the exact path or the end point, but being willing to take a step in that direction. And so she made it very accessible for me. So she's my hero. In a more formal heartbreak, it's really what's happening today, because teachers are not particularly feeling welcome in the schools. They're experiencing a lot of challenges, and the voices of saying that education is not a place for them, that's heartbreaking, because we know that people who choose education like us, we're built for it. Like, there's not any other work that we should be doing. We're made to be in education. And so really my hope is that we are able to, through the good work of projects like SPDIG, create those hospitable environments where educators can come back to feeling like this is not just a safe place to be, but a place where they get to, perform at their fullest and really contribute in the ways that they want to. So that's a little bit about me. Again, I am with Johns Hopkins, and I work in the Center for Technology and Education. And so today's talk is about, and I say talk, this is really going to be an interactive opportunity for us to explore high performance teaming that is going to get us to this overall theme of communication and coaching. So let me go ahead and get my screen shared here, and we will kick this off a little formally. Okay, can you see my screen?
It looks great, Melanie.
Okay, fantastic. So team-directed continuous improvement and coaching for systems change. So we're going to get started first with a story. So dynamic impact is essentially the work that I do. It's about continuous improvement, and within that is high performance teaming. So I'm going to talk with you about the impact of this teaming work through a story. We had an infants and toddlers coordinator with international RBI certification, routines-based interview. So if you're familiar with this, this is a Part C tool generally that we're using in many places across the country. Some people are extending into routines-based model into the pre-K, early childhood areas, but a lot of people are using this within Part C. So I know that this is not fully your world, but the experience is a common experience. So we had a coach, a coordinator with international certification. They were very passionate about the work. We also had an early childhood director who supported the use of RBI financially and philosophically, like there was an alignment here. We also had our infants and toddler providers that were participating in local training with real life application of the practice. So there was a dedication and a time spent to give that training. That resulted in 2 additional infants and toddler staff who went on to meet the international RBI certification levels. Then, because they were seeing this wasn't enough, they still were not making the momentum and the movement in getting the entire unit within the infants and toddlers team successfully utilizing this, they hired an outside trainer and a coach who came and provided a week-long RBI training institute with locally provided coaching. So they had coaching throughout the year after a week-long RBI institute. And despite that, what they found was that while momentum was increasing, they still were struggling with buy-in from the staff, that there was still quite a bit of pushback. Now, this team, because there was a really clear commitment to the work, knew that they needed to address some system level challenges. These challenges they thought were a real threat to being able to find that success with ongoing implementation and really a sustained fidelity. That's what they were hoping for. So they ended up utilizing dynamic impact for RBI to help address the system level challenges. So they formed a high performing team through this work. They engaged, of course, in the PDSA cycle, and they did this 3 times a year. You guys are familiar with that. That's not anything new. This one in particular was called the TAPIT Continuous Improvement Cycle. And then they received monthly coaching for implementation team facilitators. So the outcome here was pretty phenomenal. In that year, they were able to modify processes within the 45-day timeline to incorporate the RBI, which had been identified as one of the huge barriers that the teams were facing in really finding how can we use this tool to really help with our work in infants and toddlers. The systematic approach to review the IFSP outcomes to ensure they were functional and meaningful and attainable, this they created. They were able to, through this, come up with a systematic approach. They included the use of the RBI then at the annual review. They developed a system for onboarding and supporting new and existing staff. They developed a system for annual fidelity to the practice. And then as a result, 100% of families received an RBI for initial IFSP development. All of this happened because there was the opportunity within the high performance teaming that allowed these solutions to emerge. Prior, right, if you look back at the beginning here, we were saying, I won't go all the way back with all the animation, but at the very beginning, we had committed members of the team. But what we didn't have was a commitment that involved enough diverse voices to allow these solutions to emerge. Firstly, secondly, we didn't have processes and protocols to allow these outcomes where we were systematically thinking about what are the challenges, what are the barriers. So this is an example, and I know you likely have had some sort of experience where you came together with a really dynamic group of individuals and you were able to solve a problem. And it's exciting, the levels of change that can happen when you have the right team members come together. So we're going to use this kind of as that backdrop to think about what some of the potential is once we've developed a high-performing team that then is engaging in a systematic application of continuous improvement. But before we get into some details about high performance teams, what I want to do is have you go into a breakout group. I want you to start by thinking about what are some factors that impede successful adoption of evidence-based programming or evidence-based practices. And so what I'm going to do is put into the chat, I'll put the link to a Padlet, which is now nice and compliant. They made some updates. So what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and capture this, and then we can get you into breakout groups. We're going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not really sure if it's okay to go a full 5 minutes. You might not need that much time. Go ahead and start. We're looking for about 3 to 5, thinking about what's the challenge that you know related to adoption and really implementation with a level of fidelity for your evidence-based practices. So can you see the Padlet on my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to thank you all for having this conversation. You all are the experts in all of the many things and reasons why we have a difficult time bringing effective practices into the schools and into the classrooms. And so, the range here really reflects, I see there was someone reflecting on going to the NERN document. So, NERN talking about, and of course, this is probably goes beyond just NERN, but our implementation drivers, and knowing that we have these challenges across spaces that are predictable. And we can say whenever we have a change process that needs to occur, we can look to whether it's a competency driver or our organization driver or the leadership drivers to understand and to essentially start as a starting place for how do we solve problems. I really do want to just say, though, I appreciate the shiny object, and we're going to talk about that today in relation to high performance teaming and the challenge that this particular aspect creates for us in education. This one here about a fixed mindset, this fixed mindset speaks very clearly to how do we engage with our communication. And so what we'll discover here today is in building a high performance team and understanding our vision and our mission, that also aligns with the ways that we can now communicate about the work that we're doing. Understanding that we're moving through a change process and that there is a different way of understanding and expressing relationships to the things that we're seeing and observing. So let's go ahead then, and now that we have this panorama of challenges, let's start talking about some ways that we can sift through this to create some opportunity. So this work here, this actually one of the ideas in the Padlet was very specific to this image that comes from NERN. So what we know with intervention implementation, trying to apply those best practices, is that moving from what works in research to what's happening in practice or inside the classroom, it's not as simple as just choosing an effective practice. We also need to invest in understanding what effective implementation is, and then this piece, that enabling context. And so the first story that I've shared really points to the fact that we had strong practice identified. We had a heavy commitment to effective implementation, but we could not reach the outcomes that we were looking for without making adjustments to the system based on the barriers that were coming up for individuals. And so implementing or addressing these enabling contexts, it can be looked at through many different lenses. The work that I do, we position it around 3 top ideas, and that is what's the role of that high performance team in helping to solve challenges or create that enabling context? How can we use protocols and streamlined coaching to support? And then, of course, with always that focus on fidelity, we need to consider that when we're creating those enabling contexts, that it's not just about removing a system level barrier. If we're talking about building long-term sustainable capacity, we have to have the ability to engage a number of people in this work so that the work can continue. One of the biggest challenges that we face in education is that we have these dynamite teachers who get picked to become leaders. Those leaders step in and they are like driven to do this work, but yet they're not necessarily trained in how to distribute the work. They're very good at owning it, taking responsibility, making sure the data is there, making sure that teachers understand what they need to do. But in terms of spreading the work out so that when that leader goes on to their next adventure, the work can continue, that piece is missing a lot of times in our schools. So that shared leadership needs to be something that's cultivated, and high performance teams offers us that opportunity. So that for us, we position it within that traditional PDSA cycle. So we always start a cycle with team, because we acknowledge that you cannot do the rest of this hard work without having a solid team built. Now, those of you who are experts in implementation science, I know we have many of you here who know this and believe in implementation teams. And so, I think some of this work, I hope, aligns with what you already know and really helps to position this to the next level. So building a depth there. Now, we're going to take a question here. We're just going to examine it for just a second. And when we finish today, we're going to take a moment to answer this question. So how can high performance teams be used to help educators improve the fidelity of implementation of evidence-based practices in order to promote improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth? So we'll be exploring this question through the next slides that we're looking at. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to think about first high performance teams that are well researched in the literature in other areas. We're going to step away from education for just a moment. So we know that the world of sports and business, they have a solid space within those fields for teams, and understanding the relationship between a high performing team and achieving outcomes versus a team that maybe isn't achieving or experiencing as much high performance opportunity. And so we're going to talk about then, in terms of the sports model, what are some foundational practices? Okay, the reason we step into this is because long term, we know the research around teaming for sports has shown us that at the core, for a high performance team to experience success, to essentially win, there are these factors of communication, trust, and a strong commitment to win, which in education translates to that strong commitment to achieve those outcomes that we are seeking. So recognizing that high performing teams in the sports arena achieve this through intense study, a commitment to developing leaders that understand how to communicate, and then how to build trust within the relationships within that team. We know that high performance teams in sports have the ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances and game strategies. One example is the New England Patriots. And, I won't go into all the detail about these sports groups, but it is to say that we know that the world of education is changing rapidly, particularly during this period in time that we're living right now. And so do we have enough agility within our systems, within the ways that we engage together, to be able to adapt to these changing circumstances and to allow us to continue to move forward? This is definitely a hallmark within the sports world. Another thing is just a consistency to a team culture that over time has really influenced outcomes. So for the women's soccer team, for example, they have been a winning team from 1991 through 2019, many different times, whether it's World Cup or the Olympic gold medals. And so through this lens, we can say that because there is this powerful team culture, even though members of the team were changing during these years, the culture of the team allowed them to get back up to speed and to allow them to continue to, achieve the outcomes that they were seeking. Another factor that we see is this belief in each other and a commitment to rigorous individual and team practice. So these features really help to define. Now, transition now here to high performance teams in business. in a study, now look, you can look up a million studies, right? I'm sharing with you one here that looked at 5,000 executives over 10 years. And they were asked to share about their peak experiences as a team member, to think about that, and then to, let us know what were those dimensions of great teamwork when you sat on a team that did significant things. And what they said was there was an alignment on direction. Well, what that translates to is, of course, we come back to a really solid vision and mission and our goals, and this alignment across our work that says we are communicating with one vision here, with one mission. We're not splitting ourselves into many different parts, trying to do too many things than than what the objective is here. Now, education is, of course, is different than business. Business oftentimes does get to narrow the field in a way that we don't. However, the communication around what the objective is clear. High quality interaction. Here we come again, right? We saw this in sports. In business, we hear this as well, this idea that there needs to be trust and open communication. And in this case, a willingness to embrace conflict. And we recognize in education, conflict is just a part of what happens. We are trying to solve really complex problems. And that's at this level, right? At the state level, at the district level. But even within the classroom, there are so many conflicts that ultimately end up needing collaboration to be able to solve them. And so to embrace that conflict in a way that allows us to find solutions rather than one of the things I wrote about, I wrote a book in 2021, and I wrote about admiring the problem. We're very capable of spending a lot of time just diagnosing, saying over and over again what the problem is. What we want to do is embrace it, acknowledge it, and then use that for change. In this case, a strong sense of renewal. This idea that once you've identified it, now you can take that information and you can do something with it to promote the outcome that you're looking for. So the business arena is really deeply invested in understanding leadership and how development of leadership in particular key areas really helps to define success. And so what I would love to do is just give you a moment here in chat. Let's see some ideas. What do you think are some key areas that high-performing teams in business or leaders in business focus on, need to develop an understanding of, have to focus to build the skills, because if they don't, they're not prepared for the future. So let's go ahead in the chat and see if you have anything. Oh, trust. Yeah, how do you create trust? How do you develop that? Giving feedback, love that. And actually, that's really critical, in the classroom. And teachers are spending a lot of time trying to understand what the proper way is. Communications, yes. A clear purpose. Fantastic. Belief in each other. Right? All of these are so wonderful. You guys have my heart right now, because we're all, I feel like, on the same space and understanding how that connection between people is really important, and particularly during this time. Oh, I love this one. The possibility to listen in order to create new possibilities. Absolutely. It's that listening to understand versus listening to respond. Fantastic. Okay, these are wonderful. Well, let me just show you in this particular listing what we have. Let's see. We have a lot of the ideas that you shared. And look here. Well, let me just go to the list a little bit. Decision making, of course. We need to learn how to make decisions. We need to learn how to attract and retain talent. These are obvious needs of a strong leader. Right here, though, number 8, knowing how to create high performance teams. It's literally in the top 10. You know, when we think about these other areas of industry, other areas in the world that are significant in terms of drivers for change and for how our culture is formed, high performance teaming, it has a space at the table. It's a part of how we navigate improvement. Well, I just want to add one thing before I move on here. I'm curious about where will AI be on the next list, because we know that AI is going to be transformative across industries. We know it's going to have a huge impact in education. And so the question is, where will AI be on this list for leaders going forward? And my guess is probably within the top 10. It's going to need to be critical. And so I would just argue that probably in education, our leaders are going to want to be familiar with that as well. So high performance teams in business, you see a value and an investment in collaboration and recognizing the importance of bringing teams together, focusing on employee engagement and team building. This Patagonia team of teams approach, that there's no silos. So we see that this is positioned in business as really important. Now, finally, we are here at education. So what's happening in education? Well, education is quite complex. You are aware that there is an enormous proliferation of teams in education. We are a system that is focused on bringing people together to solve problems. We have leadership teams, we have grade level teams, special education teams, district teams, right? You could list so many different types of teams that all of us have sat on and are currently sitting on. But unfortunately, these teams, these multi-level teams, they're existing within complex policies, mandates, and laws that really do create challenges for us to be able to operate effectively as a team, just by the nature of just coming together. The complexity of the environment means that we have roles that we have to form, and oftentimes those roles are very siloed. So the work is not necessarily integrated and collaborative. So the other thing I want to say here is just that although education leaders are accepting the importance and the power of these teams, of having teams, most education leaders have not had the opportunity to learn about how do you actually create these. So how do you build, for example, in all of the listings coming up, this sense of trust, and how do you create this relationship between team members? And so it's the difficulties that we face in education, in part, is because high performance teaming really hasn't been a part of the language of education. So what do we do from here? Well, firstly, we acknowledge that to define what success is in education is much more challenging than, say, in business, where we know that the answer is increasing profits or increasing, the production of something. Or in sports, the definition of success is related to winning a competition. But in education, it is actually a bit more complicated and convoluted because we lack clarity around the definitions and the targets for what is it that we're saying we're trying to achieve in education. And not only that, but Clay Christensen in his work, he talks always about the bar being raised over and over and over again. So we don't have consensus across our country or across within a state, even sometimes, around what is the outcome we're seeking. And then with all of the social challenges, right? We say in one moment it's a focus on reading, and the next moment it's a focus on attendance and social emotional challenges. It's the outcome is very abstract, where in business and in sports, it is much clearer. So there are legitimate reasons why trying to create high performance teams is a difficult thing for the schools. However, when we do invest in it, it does provide a strategy that helps us break through the status quo. So for me, when I think of status quo, I think of, we all have schemas around how do we show up at a team? What's my role when I come to an IEP meeting and I'm representing the area that I'm representing? What is that schema? And now how do I break through that to show up differently, to participate differently? How do I know I have permission to show up differently? Because that's a really big challenge we have when we want more voice, we want more engagement, we want the value of all of the knowledge that a teacher brings to the table, but yet we don't have clarity around permission to step into those spaces. And so intentionally forming teams and developing the teams, it really provides an opportunity for us to challenge traditional schema around how do we engage collaboratively. So high performance teams in education, the barriers that we're well aware of include the bureaucratic complexities, variation in teaching goals and priorities that I've already mentioned, that no one size fits all. We don't have the same needs or focus in any particular space in the United States. We're very individual. And so it's difficult for us as a nation to wrap around a single focus, because that's just not how we're built to make decisions. We have quite a bit of siloed organizational structures. And again, I know I'm speaking to the choir. We want to see these things move in a more collaborative, where we're working together to solve problems. But really, how do you break through those structures? Well, you have to intentionally create the space to allow that to happen. There's a lack of time and resources, a resistance to change, a non-supportive culture. And it's not because anyone's intentionally trying to make this difficult, but really it is just the nature of what education looks like that makes it hard for a support system to be there when people are taking these risks to really show up and to really contribute to help solve problems. And then finally, that inadequate training, that there really doesn't exist in the same way that there does for other aspects of education. You know, where do you go to learn how to create a high performing team? Where do you go to learn how to talk about what this is? So we're going to start then by exploring, because we want to say more than just telling you that sports and business have it going on and education is struggling. Well, I want to give you some information that might be helpful to you. So first, we're going to start with thinking about whether or not groups and teams are different. Okay, so that's just in your head right now. I want for you to think about the terminology group, team, and high performance team. And do those words mean something different to you when you're thinking about this work? Or are you thinking about the teams that you sit on? So research tells us that there are different types of groups. So we have pseudo groups, traditional groups, cooperative groups, and high performance teams. Now, you will have a link for this, so you'll be able to look at it more closely when you go into your breakout group in just a little bit. The groups, these types of groups are represented across a continuum, where you start with a low engagement, right? Members are assigned, but they're not really interested, to a much more highly structured, but an increasingly collaborative environment where what we know are high performance teaming principles are represented. So we're going to talk about those principles here in a moment as well. So pseudo groups, then we see a lot of pseudo groups and we see a lot of traditional groups. This is a traditional group is where members are accountable as individuals, but not to the group itself, right? We think about in a traditional group, we come, so I'm just going to tell you my experience with a lot of IEP teams is we are coming to the table, each representing our own camp, like what general education is going to share their piece, special education is going to share their piece, related services, their piece, a facilitator has their role, and the parent has their role. And we're each accountable to the process. We are showing up for this because we all want to see this child to be successful, but we're not working together as a group to really bring all of these ideas in a way that's not as challenging, right? So we tend to get into more of a competitive mode. Well, I know this, the way I see it is this is the right way, or how I see it, this is the right way. What we want to see is we're moving towards this group accountability, and that's where you see cooperative groups come in place. So cooperative groups have an understanding that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so we are looking at concepts like sink or swim together, so that we know that either we all are successful or we're all going to fail. There's no in between here, that this, if we don't actually come together around the solution, that we're all going to suffer. And I think having been, again, on many IEP teams where that is exactly how it feels. No one's happy when you get finished because we haven't solved the problem. Now, not all IEP meetings are that way, so I hate to always be pointing the finger there, but having spent my career in special education, sat on a lot of within a lot of IEP meetings. So we do want to also think about how cooperative groups grow into this no free riders mindset, where we do show up and deal with ourselves individually, but we also acknowledge that we are accountable as a member of that community, of that group. And so cooperative groups take on a momentum where we have a greater connection to the whole and an alignment to making sure that all of the work, everyone is successful. Now, high-performing teams, they go beyond, because not only are they committed to this, they experience high levels of success, right? They achieve the outcomes they're setting because they have a strong commitment to progress monitoring. They really invest in this high levels of trust and positive interactions. We also see that high-performing teams, they are outperforming all expectations through this esprit de corps. Like, they're coming together using the energy that, all of us are coming, working really hard, and we're feeding off of each other in order to really say, well, if you can do it, I can do it. Well, of course, we're going to work hard together. And so high performing teams go that next level to really find that they're achieving those outcomes. So it is about creating the momentum and then allowing that momentum to continue, right? So when we think about that communication theme of your meetings right now, and we think about, well, what does it sound like in a high performing team? It's going to sound very different than it would sound in a traditional or a cooperative group, because we are all very clear on our vision and our mission. We are very clear about how do we see each other. Developing that trust and the positive interactions means we're going to be engaging in a particular way with our communication that's going to be heightening the value of this group, not pulling it down. And that's a really hard thing to achieve, mainly because we have a lot of, again, falling back on this idea of the schemas. How do we interact with each other? A lot of times staying with kind of regurgitating the problems that we're experiencing, we get validated, we're all, understanding the challenges that each other are facing. Well, high-performing teams have protocols and processes to keep them focused on the future, the focused on where they're headed to, so that we can acknowledge a problem, but we don't stay there because we have steps that allow us to move to the outcomes that we're seeking. So from there, just acknowledging that many of the teams we sit on are those pseudo and traditional groups. They lack that definition of success, a lack of clarity of goals, and there are these entanglements within how we're relating and interacting across with other groups. It's oftentimes lacks a clear purpose for the discussions, and we end up with weak action plans. Now, a high performance team does create a synergy in a sense. So from this, the research, we pulled that all together and we use that in our work with high performing teams to help create this understanding of, well, what is it that we really mean when we say we want you to be a high performing team, right? Because it's great to say, okay, all that it's happening out there and we want for you to be there, but we have to come together around a common language for how do we express that. So the research has found anytime you see people doing big things, hard things, accomplishing this as a collaborative group, you see things like positive interdependence. You see individual and group accountability. You also see promotive interaction. So team members actively engage in discussions, activities, and tasks and provide feedback to promote improvement and success, right? It's that intentional action to engage in a promotive way, right? So that we are staying engaged. We also see interpersonal and team skills so that we are developing the skill set needed to engage in those interpersonal communications, to engage as a member of the team. So we had talked about this before, listening actively. Well, listening to understanding how to resolve conflicts. Like we're building positive relationships in order to collaborate and appreciate and problem solve, and to do that through building new skill sets. Just like we are very familiar with that as a role in business. We know that this is how business operates. They're always looking for how do we build new soft skills? How do we understand and use interpersonal communication? Well, those same ideas are relevant here in education. Team processing is another area. So we have to be committed to progress monitoring, performance monitoring. So we want to look to see what are areas for improvement and then to make decisions for improvement, right? We want to be committed to that. That is an area of challenge for pseudo groups and definitely for traditional groups, is really staying consistent to looking at how that team is functioning and what can we do to help improve. And then finally, equal equitable opportunities for success. We want to make sure that all members of the team have access to be able to participate effectively, and that we're not keeping people out because of something that maybe we just haven't been willing to look at. So definitely looking to align and have equal access for same resources and opportunities and support. So these ideas, these principles of high performance teaming, these are where the research has really aligned around and has said these are the factors that we want to be moving our teams towards. We want to be creating conditions that allow them to build their engagement with each other around these high performance teaming principles. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into a breakout group. And what I'd like for you to do is to take a moment with your group and talk about these different types. You're going to want to think about which types of groups are you familiar with? Which types of groups do you oftentimes find yourself sitting on these teams? And then what we'll do is we're going to come back and I'm going to do a quick poll with you as an individual to see which types of groups you're mostly sitting on these days. So let's see, I'm going to put this in the chat and see if you can see if this Google Doc opens up. If all of you don't have it, I think it's okay. We just need at least one person in the group to be able to share their screen and to have it available for the group. So if we could just, I got Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. So I'm going to open up our breakout groups. I'm going to give you, let's go ahead and do 4 minutes. So I'll start closing the room at 3 and we'll have you come back, okay? I'm going to open up all the rooms. Now see you guys in a few minutes. 1. So you had a moment to look closely, a little bit more closely at the table and to think about the teams that you've been on in the past. And so what I'd like to do now is go ahead and give you another link. Let's have you take this quick poll. And that is, I'm looking to see, thinking about the standard group, where would you find that you mostly, what types of groups are you mostly sitting with? I'd love to see that. So let's go ahead and take just a moment. Hopefully you'll be able to get into that link. We can see, oh, here we go. We have a few folks. And, you know, this is really exciting to see that we are looking at quite a few cooperative groups, 41, 42%. Fantastic. You know, I think one thing I know is that as we get to these levels where you know about systems change, like this is the work that you're doing, it does change how you engage with now all of the work that you do. So this actually doesn't surprise me. When we've done this poll for others, it is oftentimes traditional that comes out as the top. So one thing to know is that you stand out, you are not representing the norm, and that you have a skill set likely that most of your colleagues that you're helping in the schools may not have. They might not have had the opportunity to spend time learning the things that you know. So this is really fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to share that. Alrighty, let's go back and continue on our work because I know our time is getting close. Jennifer, we're going till 4:30. Yes, okay.
That's right. Yes.
Excellent. Alrighty, so I just want to share another story, share some data with you as well, give you a link to this for you to look at another time. So in another school system, we were working with a district administrator for early learning and special education who was ready to do whatever it takes, right? This person had a solid commitment to wanting to improve outcomes, including for children with disabilities in her pre-K settings. And she had found that from several years of implementing the state formative assessment, which in this case was the early learning assessment, it indicated less than optimal fidelity of implementation results, along with minimal progress in SKDs. In this case, the early learning assessment uses a skills, knowledge, and behaviors to help teachers engage in that formative assessment for learning. So they use dynamic impact to provide a team-directed continuous improvement process. And in this, the team, the district administrator then formed an implementation team that comprised the director of special programs, the coordinator of childhood, early childhood and special education, birth to K, an early childhood teacher specialist, and 2 pre-K teachers, right? So in this case, we have the representation of the teachers who are actually in the field trying to do this work, helping to inform. The teachers participate in a 2-day professional development, and then were provided with monthly coaching to that was directed to the implementation team facilitator. So the person who was leading that monthly meeting was receiving the coaching. And then finally, we see that the team rated itself monthly, determining if they were high performing, on track, or needed to target improvement in the area of teamwork. So this team was, this work was bolstered by a high performing team that was engaging in that self-reflective process, that was really looking to hold themselves to standards that were higher than what many teams do, right? Many teams come, they have an agenda, they're going to work through the agenda, but how do we know how we showed up? Did we come as an individual, or did we come with that shared accountability lens? So this team took the time to evaluate and rate themselves. So they set a goal that by the end of the year, 50% of teachers would implement formative assessment at 80% fidelity of implementation. And we know that that's like the gold standard. It essentially says you have this tipping point that happens if you can get 50% implementing at 80. Well, by March, they had 78% of teachers reached full implementation in this particular scenario. And not only that, they were able to show stark improvement in outcomes. So in 2018-19, they had 14% of children demonstrating readiness for kindergarten, students with disability or children with disabilities, and 48% of children with, all children were demonstrating readiness. And by the next year, with these teachers getting up to a higher level of fidelity, they were able to make a move that was really noticeable and measurable here just in 1 year. So, the work around looking at what that change process required, they had a practice that was found to be valid, right? The early learning assessment, when you do it the way it's intended, it can create outcomes that you're wanting for helping to get more children ready for kindergarten. But they needed this team-directed continuous improvement process, along with using a protocol for high-performance teaming that then allowed them to engage systematically to get to that place of, that improved outcomes. So the research to practice, essentially, you think about our continuous improvements. When we're applying this lens, we're trying to say, what's the path we're going to take that will get us to the outcome that this best practice is supposed to deliver for us. And we recognize that because of the many barriers of creating that hospitable environment, the enabling context, having a team devoted to helping to unpack and really keep us focused on the outcome, it makes a difference. It really does make a difference. So I do want to share with you the link for this article if you would like to take a peek at that. So let me just grab that for you and pop it in the chat. All righty, let's see here. That is there for you. Now, the only thing that I will caution you with is that, oops, let's see, did I get that to go? There we go. The slide, you'll notice it says corrected graph because unfortunately the graph that had gotten printed in the journal was the wrong one. So just make sure you read the numbers or snag a picture of this one. The numbers in it are correct, but what was visually represented wasn't. So give you that little heads up. All righty. So from there, just sharing a little bit more about what that process looked like. The team is the starting point for this continuous improvement process. And we've already talked about the difference here. So forming this high-performing team is something that this work is committed to. And so using those high-performance teaming principles and helping to create clarity, right? A common language to understand how do we create conditions that will allow us to achieve more, was translated then into a protocol for building a high-performing team. So it's probably not a surprise to you. The very first thing we do is unveil beliefs, vision, and mission. And it's really critical that we take that time to do that. This team coming together needs to know why they're coming together, and they need to have a commitment to the vision they have related to, the context for coming together. They engage in naming operating standards. So we provide some places to start, but teams oftentimes realize, wow, we need to create our own. And so for my experience with this work, leading in my district, our teams created our own operating standard related to communication. We acknowledged that we needed to keep each of us really aware of what was going on, because we had so many different layers of work going on within this big grant that we needed to have a commitment to, and a commitment by stating it. Now we were one, saying we were accountable to it, but two, we were going to be coming back to it and be reminded over and over again every time we engage with the United Protocol to remind us again that this is who we said we wanted to be. We said we wanted to listen to understand. We said we wanted to use communication regularly. We're now holding ourselves to that. Identifying 6 high performance teaming principles. Well, we identify them. These have been identified. That's what the research tells us. But what we have to do is understand what they really mean. What does it mean to have positive interdependence? What does that look like, sound like, feel like? Targeting our goals. We set goals so that we can achieve more together. Identifying rotating roles, which is a really key piece for sustainability. You know, lots of places use roles and they rotate them quarterly. Sometimes they do it as frequently as monthly. That's how we do it. We really believe that every month should be a new facilitator taking responsibility so that this team has the ability to stay in shape when somebody needs to move on or someone is sick and can't be there. We all have a shared accountability to know how to run this team, to know where the materials are, to know how to work with that agenda. It's not one person who fills out the agenda. We all get a chance to be the recorder because every one of us needs to own this work. Establishing a team identity, it's very important actually in the literature, tells us that we need to know who each other are. So we create a name for our team and then of course unpacking logistics. So that's one of the protocols that we use. We also engage with root cause analysis and have a protocol for that. And then a protocol for the change, what we call the change protocol, that is basically setting up your plan, identifying your goals and your action steps. And so there are systematic pieces here as well. I won't go into those here, but that is as important. And so the TAP-IT continuous improvement cycle is going to start with team. Now, I know you're wondering, what about coaching? So we do engage with monthly coaching. What is that monthly coaching? Well, for us, of course, we define it because we want all of our coaches to be operating systematically. But essentially, what we say is that the coaching that we provide, right? This type of coaching is not instructional coaching. We need teams to be able to understand how to sustain the process of how do we interact with each other to continue to grow as a high-performing team. That's firstly. We also need to understand what that process is for engaging with our plan, right? We don't want to create a plan and then not have time to really do anything with it because we've gotten out of track. We're not focused on what we're doing. So our coaching is really about teaching how do you engage systematically with your plans to make sure that when you come together for your monthly implementation meeting, you're not spending that time talking about other things. You are getting to the business of dealing with your implementation. So this is I'm not sure if you've been doing this type of coaching in the past. I find this to be a very rewarding experience in helping in the schools because it is streamlined and it's something that it really creates this, what I find is that teachers and the leaders that are getting this type of coaching, it's like step by step around a process that now within a short period of time, they can take it and they can own it. So they're dealing with so many complicated processes around implementing an evidence-based practice and the nuances of what that looks like when you're talking about the diverse classrooms that we're teaching in. This is something that is very accessible, but we have to give them time to be able to integrate this into their own knowledge set. So, we devote, for us, we say 2 years of coaching really helps make the difference and really creates a solid team. Some teams, they go rapid fire and they're all in. And of course, you know who those teams are, and they can get this done and they know the work and they can do it much more quickly. But for a lot of teams, the reason it takes 2 years is because they're just pulled in a million directions. And so to get to that habitual state of this is what I do every time I come to a meeting, it really takes a moment. So we have defined our dynamic impact coaching with our own fidelity checklist to make sure that we're engaging the way that we want to. One of the things that we are committed to is this coaching behaviors. And so one of the things you'll see is that we talk about adhering to a 30-minute time frame for coaching, because we don't have time for extraneous things in education. We have to be really focused. What's reasonable right now to do? It's not reasonable to do everything. We have to be select and focused. And so that's what the coaching looks like. It is not asking too much of our teams and our educators. The other thing that we do is we practice what we preach, and we are demonstrating our high performance teaming principles while we're engaging in coaching. So, we have this structure. Now we coach around the meeting agenda. We help them to create their agenda. Initially, we fill it out for them, but by midpoint, we're handing the reins over to the facilitator, and we're saying, let me watch you as you're doing this. Let me help you understand how you create your own agenda. We always start our meetings with activating our team with the coach. Then they go into looking at their action steps. They have to check in, and what we do is we give them a little bit of feedback. I'm noticing this in your action plan. Have you engaged with this question yet? And if not, then this is a teamwork item. We also allow the facilitator for that month to say, I think this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And when you think about the rotating nature, right? A district leader is going to say a very different type of teamwork item than a teacher is going to say. But we need all of those voices to help us create solutions and to understand what goes into effective implementation. And so it really creates this shared accountability in a way that you really just couldn't conceptualize without rotating roles. And then finally, the wrap up, they do rate their performance. So let's see, I wanted to just show you one other thing because I'm seeing our time is nearing an end. The ongoing continuous improvement coaching, I've already really talked with you about that. It is around the process. It's about providing feedback to teams about their action plans and how they're doing with implementation. And we do this monthly with the facilitators. Now, all of this is in service of getting us to this place of moving from the research to what is happening in practice and boosting the outcomes through enabling context. Last piece I just want to share is in an evaluation. We had a third-party evaluation done on our work. We're doing this work with school improvement teams. And so the school improvement teams are K through 12, and they're working reading, math, and safety teams. And, some of the feedback we received is things like, we got more done rather than going off on a bird walk. Like, we cannot underestimate how important that is, that teams understand you don't have time to be doing these other things during your implementation meetings. You have to be focused on implementation. Now, of course, I don't say it like that. No one says it like that, but it is giving a process that keeps you focused. And this one here, it's nice that people are empowered to get the team back on track. I'm allowed, because we've decided our standards say every one of us is accountable to getting this work done. Anybody can say it's time to get back on track. That's what you're supposed to do. In our evaluation results, we also had feedback like, let's see, I think having a smaller team and that shared leadership is really helping us to move forward in our planning. Intentionally creating a team will deliver a different result and a different outcome in terms of an experience for members than simply pulling a team together. And lastly, the last one I wanted to share is that, let's see, I felt that I had a hand in decision-making and setting up next steps for our team's plans. We can't, again, underestimate the power of the voices of these team members. So I'm realizing we are out of time. And so you are off the hook for having to answer the challenge question in a breakout. But I hope that you've had a moment during this time together to be thinking about, is high performance teaming something that you could see in a space, that's something that maybe you would want to bring to your the work that you're doing? There are these opportunities that I don't know that we would recognize or be able to see without having an intentional focus. And I hope that you'll consider them in the future. So, Jennifer.
Thanks, Melanie. Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to point out, and very quickly. One is about setting the vision. It's not something, I don't know if I've thought quite a lot about that. Maybe many of you have, but it's something that the Effective Innovation Cohort, EIC, I think that's what it stands for. So this is a Gates Foundation funded project that NERN, National Implementation Research Network, is helping out with. And they worked long and hard at setting their vision and communicating that vision, and they've had a lot of success. And so they think at least some of that is due to the vision. Someone had pointed out to me the strategy of having a different facilitator each month, and the facilitator gets to choose what an important discussion topic is a great one. I think just having, an agenda template may be what some people need. So I think there were a lot of different things to pick out of this that I know people are already doing great work, but maybe they can amplify their teaming structures by choosing some of these strategies. So, yeah.
Well, I hope so. I really hope so. There are a lot of spaces where you make a small change and it really can have a ripple that makes a space more hospitable for educators to work in. And that is, of course, my hope. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think the thing I'm going to be noodling on is the renewing idea, how we renew. It's a pretty important thing right now, using some of this information. So it was great to see all of you. And thank you, Melanie, so much for sharing your time with us again. You are a great partner to our work.
Excellent. Well,
Have a
thank
good
you so much.
afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey.